Hey, what's up? It's Tati back with another review of Dark Side of the Ring Season 2, Episode 3, The Life and Crimes of New Jack. Now, New Jack is someone that I think a lot of people, including fans and wrestlers, would look at. He was someone who kind of couldn't separate from the character New Jack and who he was in real life, which was Jerome Young. And he was lost into that character. Now, what I really think, especially after watching this, was that he grew up having a really rough childhood and experiencing a lot of things that children should not experience. And because of that, later on in life, he was able to pull out the pent up aggressions that he had within himself and come up with the extreme hardcore wrestler known as New Jack. Now, a lot of people don't like him, but for some reason, I've always kind of gravitated towards him. He kind of reminds me of New York. That's where I'm from, and when I listen to his interviews and things like that, and how he talks, and despite how some of his stories are pretty brutal, it reminds me of being in New York and listening to the guys in the neighborhood talking about their experiences. And for whatever reason, it just kind of feels like home listening to him. I know that probably sounds a little bit weird, but there's something a little bit relatable about him with me when I listen to him speak. Now, unfortunately, he did pass away 2021, and he was also doing interviews with Dark Side of the Ring back when season 3, and after one of those episodes, he had shortly had passed away. But I do find him to be someone fascinating as far as everything that he's been through and things that he's done. It's like you kind of want to dissect his brain and see like what the hell is going on in there. Let's get into this review and talk about some of these absolutely ridiculous things that New Jack has done. He really got his big break at Smoky Mountain Wrestling with Jim Cornette. Now, he was trained by Ray Candy, and Ray Candy gave him advice that if he really wanted to break out and stand out from everyone else in the business, that he had to create a character for himself that he had never seen before. So he got his name New Jack from the movie New Jack City, which takes place in New York, which is probably why I feel like he reminds me of people from New York. And he's actually from Greensboro, North Carolina. Now, he also came up with his character, and I really do feel like it's really based off of, from his childhood and his upbringing, the things that he saw growing up, which is what turned him into this hardcore wrestler, whatnot. Now, in Smoky Mountain, they actually do start the gangsters over there. So it was him, D'Lo Brown, and Mustafa Saeed. They were a trio that pretty much fed off of real life social and racial situations that were going on in America. So in the Smoky Mountain territory, majority of the fans were white, and there was a lot of racial tension. So they fed off of that to get some heat. And while they did that to get some heat, unfortunately, they went through real life racism where even the crowd would call them niggers and want to attack them solely based off of because of their their race. And even though they did that, both D'Lo and New Jack on the show, they said that they know it's something that needed to be done so that they can get some real life heat from the fans. But at the end of the day, they didn't like how they were called those types of names, and they felt like in real life it was unsafe for them, especially after the shows, because sometimes some of those promos and some of those things that they said would really get the fans riled up and really literally wanting to kill them. So believe it or not, when it came to the gangsters, D'Lo was actually the more tamed in the group. Mustafa and New Jack were pretty much off their rockers. And Sandman was one of the people who was interviewed for this episode, and he talked about how Mustafa Saeed liked to smoke pencil shavings in his joints to get high. New Jack confirmed it. D'Lo plead the fifth. New Jack said that he seen him get so high off of these pencil shavings one time that while Mustafa was getting arrested, he was so high he kept thinking that the police officers wanted to have sex with him, and he kept shouting for people to help him so that they wouldn't have sex with him. But he was so high that he just didn't understand what was going on, and these guys are absolutely nuts. Now, going back to them getting a lot of heat from the fans, one night they were to wrestle, and they wanted to do something to get the fans riled up, but New Jack had gotten some dental work done and he couldn't talk because his mouth was so sore, and he wanted to make a statement without actually making a statement. So what he and Mustafa does is they went to Walmart. They bought a baby doll, and they made sure it was a white baby doll, and they bought a rope. So when New Jack went into the ring, he took out this baby and hung it by a rope that's supposed to be a noose, and the crowd went absolutely crazy. They were so upset that they would do something to symbolize hurting a white child. They were shouting out racial slurs and saying that they wanted to kill them, and they got the fans exactly where they wanted them to, but they still hated the fact that the fans really showed who they really were. So one of the storylines that really pushed things over the edge when it came to the Gangsters was their feud with the Rock and Roll Express. The Rock and Roll Express has been in wrestling forever at this point, and they wanted to do something to get the Gangsters into the tag title scene, because at the time the Rock and Roll Express did have the tag team gold at Smoky Mountain. So they came up with being inspired by the 1992 police beating of Rodney King, who was a prominent figure in the black community. They pretty much was doing that, but the opposite, where they were attacking Rock and Roll Express, but doing it for racial reasons, kind of like how they did with Rodney King, so they could draw a lot of heat. And y'all already know this, but Jim Cornette, he's over there and he's just saying yes to everything that they're saying, because I think Jim, he knows what works for wrestling, but at the same time, he knew that this was going to be really, really big. And you know what? It actually turned out being a huge thing. It got to the point where fans were waiting for the Gangsters to come out after the show so that they can attack them. They had bricks, they had bats, they had all these things because they literally wanted to kill them. They were so upset about what happened in the ring earlier that night that the police had to come and escort the Gangsters to safety so that nothing would happen, because they were pretty sure that they probably wasn't going to make it to their families that night. And things even got so crazy that the NAACP, which is an organization that's supposed to represent African Americans in America, they contacted Jim Cornette and said, look, we don't like that black representation that you guys got going on at Smoky Mountain. It does not represent blacks as a whole. Basically telling them to stop what they're doing. Jim Cornette, he tells New Jack what happened. New Jack comes on the following week and he's speaking against the NAACP, and he's like, well, we don't give a fuck about what you think. We're going to do whatever we want here. We're not trying to represent other black people. And that also gave them a lot of heat against them as well. And to be honest, I like this, because nowadays that's something that's missing in pro wrestling, where we get some real life heat, where an organization like that comes and calls and have things to say. That's something we don't see in wrestling these days. Nowadays, you know what's real, you know what's fake. Back then, people just didn't know, and kayfabe was so much more alive back then. So now is 1995, and the Gangsters probably can't get more heat than what they already had at that time. And our homie Paul Heyman reached out to the Gangsters and offering them way more money than Jim Cornette can actually pay them. And on top of that, they had a platform that was known for extreme wrestling. And New Jack and the Gangsters, they just could not say no to that offer, and they ended up signing with ECW shortly after. And Jim Cornette says that he wished that they ended off on better terms, but as far as them getting over in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, they just couldn't go any further with that. Now, New Jack talks about his childhood and how his dad was an alcoholic, and he watched his dad stab his mom 5 times in front of their whole family. And a few months after that, his mother just had enough and decided that she was going to leave. And while she's, gathering everything to leave, his father had shot her in the back of her leg to keep her from leaving. And he does credits all those moments that he saw to why he became such an extreme wrestler. So let's talk about one of the most infamous moments in pro wrestling, the mass transit incident. So the mass transit incident was about a match that New Jack had with another person called Mass Transit. Now, Mass Transit, he went around, he probably had maybe like 5 matches at the most by the time Paul Heyman had invited him to come to ECW to fill in for Axel Rotten. Now, Mass Transit was going around telling everybody that he's 21 years old and he'd been wrestling for God knows how long. And the truth is that he's 17 years old, and by that time, he didn't even have like 5 matches. Now, what he did have was some matches. So, Mass Transit, he was like over 200, maybe 250, and he had matches with midget wrestlers, and one of them is called named Tiny the Terrible. And Paul Heyman saw these matches and wanted to bring all 3 of them to come. However, that night Axel Rotten could not make it, and they asked Mass Transit to fill in for him. And Tiny and his partner kind of felt the type of way because the 3 of them came together so they could be on the show, but Mass Transit decided to, go solo and do his own thing since an opportunity came about. And you know what? I understand why he did that, but I think it wasn't long after he was in the ring that he regretted that decision. So that night, Mass Transit was filling in for Axel Rotten. So it's supposed to be Axel Rotten and Devon as partners versus the Gangsters. But instead, Mass Transit was partners with Devon going into that match. Now, prior to that match, Mass Transit reached out to New Jack backstage and said, hey, in the ring, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. I want you to do that. And New Jack was so upset because he's like, you're a newbie and you walking out to a vet telling him what to do. Like, that's not how we work back here. And that really made him upset. And he told Paul Heyman that after he's done with him in 10 years, people are still going to be talking about this match. And guess what? It's been longer than that, and we're still talking about this match. So now New Jack is pissed off and they're about to have this match, and before he gets into the match, he gets high as hell, and then he goes to Devon and said, Devon, I don't even want you in this match. I gotta teach this dude a lesson. So as soon as the bell rang, Devon, he doesn't even get hit not one time. He just gets out the ring and he's off on the side. So then New Jack, he takes a surgical knife and he is like sticking Mass Transit in the head with it several times on his forehead, but he's not bleeding. So then he decides to slice his forehead, and now he's bleeding. Blood is just coming down his face. Then he decides to just attack the hell out of him. And guess what? This dude, Mass Transit family, is literally in the audience watching this movie. I mean, watching this match. I said movie. Like, it sounds like a movie, right? Because it's so insane. They're watching this match, and part of me is like, wait a minute. Why would his family be there? They know he's a minor getting into a match, especially with somebody like New Jack. Why would they allow this to happen? So now the audience is horrified. His family is horrified, and he got the shit beat out of him or whatnot. And they brought a stretcher to take him out. And then that's when his dad wanted to come out there and go with the EMTs and go back there and speak to them about what happened, because, oh, my son's a minor, he's only 17 years old. oh, so now he's only 17 years old, when obviously you knew that coming into this situation, and you allowed him to be in a ring in a hardcore wrestling promotion, and you wasn't going to say anything until things got really, really brutal. And New Jack said that the whole time the dad was yelling and cursing at him and calling him a nigger, and he was so upset. And he was like, if there wasn't a lot of people there, he would have probably got his hands on him for calling him that. So in the end, mass transit, he ended up getting 50 stitches. The story was on the news talking about how a minor was in the ring. And to be honest, the family knew he was a minor and they did nothing about it. So it's really their fault if anything went wrong. They should have never allowed it. So now there are charges against New Jack. He's looking at 5 years for assault and battery. They go to court, and they need as much help as they could possibly get. For New Jack, he had to say this, that out of the jurors, one person was black and everyone else was white. And he was like, he really wanted the black guy to be his saving grace in this situation. But he said that sometimes when he would look over to the juries, that he would see this guy dozing off and nodding off. And he's like, oh my God, please be listening, because I need you to be the one to speak out when they're coming out with their decision. So he asked Tiny the Terrible, which is the midget wrestler that was there that night, to speak out for him during this trial so that they could help him win. What he wanted him to do in return, though, Tiny was like, look, I'll do this for you, but I really want to go to WWE and I need help to get there. And New Jack said that he'll help him get to WWE. And after the trial, he actually had some spots in WWE when he needed a midget wrestler. And he's like, he doesn't know how New Jack did it, but he did get some opportunities with WWE. Now, during the trial, we also had Paul Heyman, who was speaking out about the situation because it's his promotion. And the two things that helped made things better for New Jack was that Paul Heyman went up there, and New Jack says that Paul Heyman was really working everybody in the courtroom or whatnot. That's what they do in pro wrestling, so they can do that in real life. So he basically finessed them into making them feel sorry for New Jack. And he also said that, New Jack dad calls him the N-word. And then the attorney is like, oh, sir, can you elaborate? Like, what's the N-word? And then he looks over to New Jack. He said, I'm so sorry that I have to say this. And then he said niggers in the courtroom. And then everybody just lost their mind. Like, why would he call him a nigger and things like that? That's one thing that helped. And then once they found out that the dad was supporting the son being a wrestler, despite him being a minor, that it was basically the family's fault because they knew that they lied to the promoters about their son's age just so he can wrestle and make some money and, get some fame off of this. But it's ultimately their fault. So they end up dropping the charges and nothing ends up happening with that. Now, a few years later, they do try to sue New Jack again in a civil suit for damages, but Mass Transit ended up dying after complications from gastric bypass surgery. So the whole thing was later dropped. So now let's talk about New Jack's feud with Vic Grimes. There are two matches that are really important in this situation. So we're way back in 2000, Living Dangerously ECW pay-per-view, where these two have a really hardcore match. Now, before this match, New Jack gets coked the hell up before his match. So he's high as hell. And he talks to Vic about what they're going to do in this match. Now, one of the spots in this match requires for them to climb up a 15-foot scaffold, and they're going to crash onto a table that's all the way at the bottom. Now, Vic, he agrees to do this. He seems cool with it or whatnot, up until the very last second when they're about to do this. So now, if you look back at this moment and take a look, I did look on Peacock to see if this pay-per-view was there. The pay-per-view was there, and they do have this match on there. I have heard that WWE has removed certain things on certain pay-per-views or whatnot. I had not yet to see that yet, but I checked to see if it was there, and it was there. And this clip is on YouTube as well if you don't have Peacock. But right when they were supposed to do this, Vic is looking so concerned, and he's like, no, 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 he doesn't want to do it. He changed his mind. If it was up to him, he would have just climbed right back down. And he's telling New Jack no. New Jack is pissed off because he's like, bro, we literally talked about this, and now you're changing your mind. You are coming down there with me. And what he does at the last second is he grabs Vic and throws them both down onto this table. Now, while they're falling down 15 feet, it's obviously it happens really fast in real time, but what ends up happening is Vic ends up like flipping in the air, and he lands on New Jack, and New Jack cracks his skull. And from that, he had lost vision from one of his eyes. He had severe migraines every day. He also had severe insomnia as well. So that match had given him some permanent medical issues, and he blames Vic for it. To be honest, I feel like he should blame himself because he was really adamant about doing this, and they could have changed their mind last second, but I know that this spot was so important for him to do that he just had to get it done. And he was the one who grabbed Vic. Vic at that point wasn't willing to do it, so I do think it's his fault. Now, he was really, really upset about it, and he decided that, you know, the next time he gets into the ring with Vic, that he was going to get revenge, and he sure did. So fast forward to 2002, New Jack is now in XPW. ECW did file for bankruptcy in 2001, so he was out of there after doing some work in the indie circuit. Now he's in XPW, and he has a match with Vic Grimes. And guess what, you guys? It's a scaffold match. This time, instead of 15 feet, it's 40 fucking feet high. Now, they're up 40 feet. While they're up 40 feet, and they're, you know, wrestling up there, we have 12 tables in the ring stacked up with each other. Now, this is supposed to break their fall. So when they fall down, they'll be falling through the tables. So now, New Jack and Vic, they're up there on the scaffold, and they're going at it. Believe it or not, before that match, Vic goes to New Jack and says, hey, I'm sorry about what happened 2 years ago, you know, when they fell off that scaffold or whatever. And New Jack was pissed off because he had never heard him apologize about what happened. He never called him to say he was sorry or to see how he was doing. And New Jack just felt insulted that after 2 years that he would finally apologize about it. So New Jack felt like, you know what, I should just make him pay for what he did to me. And now the son of a bitch is apologizing to me. So during the match, New Jack takes out a taser and tases Vic. And Vic, he falls down to his knees. And then he starts telling New Jack, I can't feel my legs. And then New Jack's like, good, motherfucker. You shouldn't be able to feel anything after what you did to me. Then he snatches him up, and then he throws him down. He doesn't throw him down so that he can hit the tables like you're supposed to do. He throws him down so he can fall outside of the ring onto the floor. At this point, it's looking like attempted murder. And he throws him down. He actually falls. And New Jack, he's happy with that. He is hoping that he is going to have broken bones, probably get a concussion or whatever, because he felt like he has permanent damage from that match that they had last. So he wanted the same for Vic. But it turns out that Vic only had a dislocated ankle, and that was the most of the extent of his injuries. So it wasn't really payback as far as New Jack is concerned. But as far as pro wrestling goes, this is definitely the nastiest fall I've ever seen. If y'all thought the Hell in a Cell match with Mankind and Undertaker was something, this right here is absolutely insane. Take a look at it on YouTube. You'll see some clips so you can see how it looked. Actually, he really intended on hurting him for revenge. New Jack also had a infamous match with Gypsy Joe, who was actually 69 at the time. Now, Gypsy Joe, his gimmick was him being someone who basically didn't feel any pain. So when he's having a match, he doesn't sell anything because then that means he would feel it, right? So New Jack is not feeling that. Every time New Jack would do something even more violent, he just didn't really seem to be selling anything. Now, the more violent he got, the more crazy the crowd went. And then they started calling him racial slurs, and that made him even more upset. So he decided to just literally beat the living hell out of Gypsy Joe. And the match ended up in no contest because it got just absolutely over the top. Now, when you think about New Jack, people often wonder, like, why didn't he go to WWE? I'll answer that. He's a freaking liability. Like, if he would have been over there, he would have just caused a lot of unwanted chaos for WWE. So I totally see why they did never signed him to be over there. And in 2004, he had another match that just showed anyone who was booking any promotion why they would not want to hire someone like New Jack, because sometimes he just do things that are just absolutely uncalled for. Alright, y'all. So the producers asked New Jack if there was ever a time that he took things too far, and he actually mentions not really, but he remembers that there was a couple of times that maybe he did. In this particular instance, in 2004, he has a match with a wrestler named Hunter Red. Now, Hunter Red, he is in the Jacksonville territory. I think it was called Thunder Wrestling Federation. Yeah, it was in Jacksonville. So he's wrestling with them, and he requests that he wants to have a match with New Jack. The promoter over there is like, are you sure you want to do this? Because, like, this is a whole different ball game. This might not be what you want. But he's adamant that he wants to go against New Jack. So the booker sets things up, and they're going to have a match. Prior to the match, they are getting ready, and they're kind of like in a public place where other people are. And Hunter goes up to New Jack and said, hey, can we talk about what we're going to do in this match? Then New Jack's like, all right, let's go to the back and talk about it. But Hunter was like, no, let's talk about it right here. And New Jack's like, no, I don't want to talk about it around other people. We could talk about it privately. So they make it to the back, and they're talking about what happened. New Jack is going to talk about, you know, what they're going to do with the match or whatnot. And out of the blue, Hunter just gets up and just leaves. And New Jack is pissed off because he wanted to talk to him, but then he gets up and leaves as he's talking, and he felt so disrespected. So what he ends up doing before the match is he has this Wolverine prop thing that you put in your hand that has the claws on it, right? He pulls out one of them and puts it in his pocket in case things pop off during the match. And I guess they do pop off during the match. So during the match, first thing they do is they lock up, and then Hunter gets him into a corner of the ring, and then he started throwing some real blows at his face, like throwing some real punches at him. And you know, New Jack is really upset about that. And at some point, it seems like New Jack is trying to restrain him because he seemed to go a little off script. And then New Jack went in his pocket, took out that knife thing, and ends up stabbing him. Now, New Jack said he stabbed him 9 times with it because he counted each time he stabbed him. But on the news reported that it was 16 times. And if you look at that match, you can see people who were there that look horrified about what was going on, because it just seems like this is not even part of the match. So with things going off left, somebody calls 911. Now, this match is actually happening in this big ballroom in a hotel, right? So the person who calls 911 is saying, hey, there is a stabbing at the hotel. A big black guy with camouflage is stabbing a white guy repetitively. Now, the police, they come in there thinking like this is like some kind of terrorist attack or whatever. And they're drawing their guns at New Jack and asking him why he hates white people. And I'm like, wait a minute. Why didn't the person who called saying, hey, this is a wrestling show and one of the wrestlers is just taking things overboard or something? That is so different compared to what the caller had said. That makes a huge difference. Now, with this incident, New Jack does get arrested, right? And shortly after, Hunter goes visit New Jack at the jail. And he tells New Jack, he said, look, I got a good idea here. I'll drop the charges if you agree for us to go on the road together and continue our feud and go from, indie circuit to indie circuit and, just going off and rolling with the story now that the story got some media attention. And he's like, okay, if you drop the charges, I'll do it. 3 weeks later, Hunter drops the charges and New Jack is out. New Jack packs his shit and just runs off in the sunset, and he never spoke to Hunter again. And God knows whatever happened to Hunter after that, but he obviously didn't get a chance to continue that feud. Now, after that happened and New Jack was out of jail, New Jack's mom, who hardly ever talks to him and didn't support him being a wrestler, contacts him, and she's really upset that this story had made the news and that he was, being really violent towards somebody. And he ends up cursing her out and saying that, I'm like this because of you and because of what you and dad were doing. All this abuse and physical violence that I witnessed as a child has made me be as tough as nails as how I am right now, and this is why he is the way he is. Now, I know a lot of people don't agree with what New Jack does, and I totally understand, because a lot of times he goes off script and does things for himself, which is not safe at all, especially when there's this untold rule where it's like, when you and I are in the ring, we're going to protect each other, even though we have to put on a really big show for everyone in attendance. And at times, New Jack did not go by that code. So that part I don't agree with. But I do agree that I did find him to be really, really entertaining in the ring. Some of that stuff that he was doing was pure trash, to be honest with you. I'm not too much of a fan of hardcore wrestling. But when he wasn't wrestling and he's doing interviews and he's talking, he comes off more... I don't know. He comes off really entertaining, and sometimes you could see more of a human side of him rather than someone that seems like a monster and just doing whatever the hell he wants in the ring. This was a really cool episode. I really liked how, New Jack just said exactly how he felt, and he not worried about what people thinks about him. That's another thing that I do like, when people just don't really give a fuck about what other people think. But don't do it to the point that you want to hurt and kill people in the ring. I do feel like he had to battle a lot of demons throughout his life, and unfortunately his life was cut short back in 2021. And it was really, really sad when I found out about what happened. Guys, thanks so much for watching my review. I'll be back with episode 4. Bye.